But let me waste no time in introducing our first speaker who's here with us today. And his name is Keith Stroup. And if you are familiar with NORML, you are definitely familiar with him. He founded NORML, and he's going to be talking a lot about, what has NORML done over the last 50 years as we celebrate, the 50th anniversary. Of course, this isn't how we would think of a normal celebration for that, but we're improvising, and we're really happy to have him with us here today. He's the founder and the legal counsel for National NORML. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight his video, make sure that he is unmuted. It looks like he is. So if you'll go ahead and take it away, Keith.
Thank you very much, Jax. It's lovely to be with you to help you celebrate our annual national holiday. It is a little strange to be celebrating it in a virtual manner, but I think we're all getting used to working at home. We're at the NORML national office. We're starting our 6th week now of teleworking. First, let me say that when you raise the subject of what has NORML contributed to the legalization movement over the last 50 years, it seems to me that what we primarily have done is, following 35 years, I founded the organization in late 1970. And by that point, we'd had 35 years of reefer madness propaganda. And we recognized we needed to change the American perspective on marijuana smokers. There was no way we were going to be able to legalize marijuana if they continued to think that we were dangerous and neurotic people. In fact, Gallup, the polling organization, had just taken their first poll asking the American public how many people supported full marijuana legalization. The year before NORML was started, they did that in 1969. Before that, they did not even think it was an important enough issue to raise on the national surveys. And on that initial survey, only 12% of the American public supported what we were trying to do at NORML. 88% of the public were opposed to our goals. So what we tried to do, especially throughout those first early years, first couple of decades, was to encourage marijuana smokers to come out of the closet and to stress the fact that there's absolutely nothing wrong with smoking marijuana. At the time we started NORML, there was this general sense that marijuana smoking wasn't just a bad habit. It was immoral. It was sinful. It was, fill in the blank. But there were millions of Americans who just, after all these years of anti-marijuana propaganda from the government, they really thought marijuana smoking was a dangerous thing. Well, let me say that in many ways, it's really now a wonderful time to be alive if you're a marijuana smoker. Today, we have 5, 6 different national surveys, including the Gallup poll, that shows roughly 68% of the American people now support full legalization, 2 out of 3 Americans. And again, when you realize we only had 12% support when we started, what that demonstrates is that although it's taken a lot longer than we had hoped and expected, over time, we finally won the hearts and minds of a majority of the American people. Now, when you realize that only 14% of the American adult public are current smokers, roughly 50% of the adults in the country acknowledge they've tried marijuana at some time in their life, but only about 14% are regular current smokers. So the fact that we're showing 68% support indicates that it's not just the marijuana smokers who are supporting legalization, but we now enjoy the support of a majority of the non-smokers as well. And that is obviously a crucial part of winning this battle. Now, let me quickly point out that despite the progress we've made, we have 33 states that have fairly meaningful medical marijuana laws. We have 11 states and the District of Columbia where marijuana has been fully legalized for all purposes for adults. But at the same time, there were still more than 600,000 Americans arrested last year on marijuana charges. So we've still got a good bit of work to do before we're done. People occasionally come up to me when I'm out giving a speech someplace and say, you guys are having so much success, you're going to put yourself out of work. Well, I wish that were the case, but I can assure you that I think we have years more work to do before we reach our ultimate goal. At NORML, our ultimate goal is we want responsible marijuana smokers to be treated fairly in all aspects of their lives. We don't think anyone should have to worry about losing their job simply because they smoked a joint on the weekend or in the evening and then went to work the next day and had a drug test. Unless they show some level of impairment, you should not have to risk job discrimination. The same thing's true if you're a couple who have a young child or young children. It's fairly common that if a nosy neighbor complains to the Department of Child Welfare that they smell marijuana smoke, they start off with the assumption that you're probably an unfit parent because you smoke marijuana. The first thing they do is send someone out to do an examination of your house, and they make you take a drug education course and a parenting course. That is absurd, and it needs to be changed. Likewise, there are maybe 15 states that have DUID laws that are called per se laws, where if you have any THC in your system, any at all, you are charged with a DUID, driving under the influence of drugs, without the slightest evidence that you're impaired. That's absurd, and it needs to be changed. So we've got lots of work to do as we work our way down the road. But the main thing we're focusing on right now is, obviously, most of Americans, up around 88, 90%, favor medical marijuana. And I think over the next 3, 4, 5 years, we should be able to adopt medical marijuana laws in the remaining states that don't yet have it. But remember, most marijuana smokers are not ill. We smoke marijuana because we enjoy the high. It allows us to relax in the evening. A lot of us find that it seems to open up our creative juices and allows us to do some more creative work than we might otherwise do. But we're not sick. So in order for us to get rid of this practice of treating marijuana smokers like criminals, we've got to legalize marijuana regardless of why one smokes. What marijuana smokers want, incidentally, is sort of what consumers want in any other aspect of our culture. We want a product that's high quality, that's safe, convenient, and affordable. We want the marijuana or the marijuana product tested by a state certified lab to make sure there's no adulterants or heavy metals or dangerous pesticides in it. And we want to make sure the labeling, at least for THC and CBD, is accurate. A lot of it on the black market today is not accurate for certain. So we've got a ways to go before we're going to get all of this done. But in the end, what I would say is this: NORML's contribution is, I think we have changed America's perspective on responsible marijuana smokers. They now recognize that, just as with alcohol, we make a distinction between use and abuse, and we need to do the same thing with marijuana. In the end, we're really only dealing, incidentally, with marijuana. We're really dealing with personal freedom, and with the continued support and help of all the great NORML groups around the country, including certainly Texas NORML, that does some fantastic work. We're going to return a measure of personal freedom to the lives of tens of millions of Americans over the coming years. Thank you.
I am going to unmute myself so that we can chat for a quick second, Keith. I wanted to ask you, Texas NORML was founded originally back in the 70s with Bill Norton. And what really drove them to create the organization was a visit that you had back in the early 70s down here. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, we spent a lot of time in the first 2 or 3 years that NORML was in business. Texas had the worst marijuana laws in the country, and not just the potential sentences on the books, but they enforced it that way. There were large numbers of University of Texas college students, for example, that have been busted with an ounce or so of marijuana and sent down to the University of Texas to serve 10 and 20, 30-year prison sentences. I think when we first visited the prison system in Texas, they had over, I believe it was over 30 people serving life sentences
Wow.
for nonviolent marijuana offenses. We worked early with a colleague of mine, Jerry Goldstein, who's a prominent member of the NORML Legal Committee and a prominent attorney in Texas and nationwide. Jerry was the person I worked with most closely during those early years. And we managed to develop a relationship with the head of the Texas prison system at the time. And they were resentful of all of these nonviolent offenders being sent to fill up their prison, and in particular college kids. So they actually arranged for us to come through with a New York Times reporter, an AP reporter, and to meet some of these prisoners who were serving these long mandatory sentences. And they were like the kid next door. They were totally harmless. They were, but for the grace of God, they were people like us. We worked during those early years in Texas primarily because that's where people were paying the heaviest price. Richard Cowan, who was an early executive director of NORML for a few years, Dick at the time, was also working in Texas and was an early organizer. So again, when you're doing this kind of work, you don't necessarily choose where the fight's going to be fought. The government chooses that by where they put their enforcement. And so we were simply going any place we could go where we thought we could get some people out of jail. And by the way, in Texas, as a result of that media trip that we took, we ended up with almost all of those people. There were 12 or 15 people that the warden had available for the media to interview. And over the course of the next few months, I think every one of those people were in fact let out of prison. Sometimes you can do more good than you think by simply speaking truth to power. And that's really what we were trying to do in Texas.
That's awesome. Yeah, I loved hearing that story and kind of understanding where we've come from. You know, in Texas, we still have a fight to go. There's about 80,000 Texans every year that are getting arrested. Not all of them are ending up with charges. There are a lot of places that are instituting their own diversion programs and everything to the best of their ability. So it's nice to see that things have changed. You know, NORML has pushed a lot of great legislation across the entire country. And I think that in this upcoming session, we have a really big opportunity to make sure in Texas that we can catch up a little bit more, make our program more comprehensive. So I really appreciate you joining us today, Keith, and talking about this.
My pleasure. It has always been a nice experience to work with the Texas activists. It's always been fun.
Oh, thank you so much.